Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
From AI-inspired insights from farmers.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here, we'd love to hear from you too.
Absolutely.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely leave a comment telling us what you want to see more of on this deep dive.
We're always looking for new ideas, and we really value your feedback.
So what farm-related mysteries are you dying to uncover?
Right.
What questions are keeping you up at night? Let us know, and maybe we'll tackle them in a future deep dive. Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Look, we're facing a pretty incredible challenge globally. By 2050, estimates suggest nearly 10 billion people will need feeding.
That's a huge number.
It really is, especially when you think of the land we traditionally farm on. Well, it's shrinking fast. We're down to about a third of the arable land per person we had back in 1970.
Yeah, the pressure on our food systems is immense. And traditional agriculture, it's already battling things like, intense heat, droughts, poor soil quality. It's getting tougher.
Which is exactly why we need new ideas.
Absolutely. We need innovation.
And that brings us to today's deep dive. Vertical farming. It sounds futuristic, maybe, but it's a really promising solution.
It is.
So our mission today is to unpack how it works, look at just how efficient it can be, explore the tech that makes it possible, and crucially, ask if it makes economic sense.
Right, the bottom line.
Exactly. So whether you're maybe thinking about starting a farm yourself, or you just want to understand the future of food, stick around. Okay, let's get right into it then. Vertical farming. For a lot of people, it probably still conjures up sci-fi images. What is it, fundamentally?
Yeah, it sounds complex, but the core idea is pretty straightforward. Vertical farming is essentially growing plants in layers stacked vertically.
Like shelves.
Kind of like shelves, yeah. Or like a multi-story building where each floor grows crops. And these are usually built right in or near cities. The key is maximizing how much you can grow in a small footprint, per square meter.
So it's not just stacking, it's changing how the plants grow, often
Right.
without any soil.
Exactly. That's a big part of it. Soil isn't always necessary in these systems. One of the main methods is hydroponics.
Right, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so with hydroponics, the plants grow directly in water that's enriched with nutrients. No soil needed. It's very efficient with water.
Okay.
Then there's aquaponics. That one's really interesting. It combines hydroponics with fish farming.
Fish, how does that work?
Well, the fish produce waste, which is rich in nutrients. That water gets filtered naturally and then fed to the plants. So the fish feed the plants, and the plants help clean the water for the fish. It's like a little ecosystem.
A closed loop, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. And then you also mentioned growing media.
Yes. What's that about?
So instead of soil, sometimes plants need a bit of physical support for their roots. Growing media are these porous, soil-free materials. Think of things like rock wool. It holds water well, lets air circulate.
Okay.
Or you might see expanded clay pellets. They're lightweight, good for drainage. Or perlite, vermiculite. The point is they provide structure and help deliver that nutrient solution efficiently without the downsides of soil, like pests or compaction. They're usually sterile, pH neutral, things like that.
So it's not just what they grow in, it's the whole environment being tightly controlled.
That's absolutely critical. Precision control is really the hallmark of vertical farming. These are indoor systems, completely sealed off from the outside, weather, pests, seasons, everything.
Total control.
Total control. Temperature, humidity, light, often specialized LED light, CO2 levels, water, nutrients. It's all meticulously managed. This level of control is what really lets you optimize growth.
That control is fascinating.
Yeah.
But why the big push now? Why is this becoming so critical, especially for cities? It feels like a big shift from traditional farms.
Well, it connects directly to those global trends we mentioned earlier. Population growth, for one, but also massive urbanization. By 2050, something like 70% of us will live in cities.
And cities don't exactly have endless acres of farmland.
Not at all. Land in cities is scarce and expensive, so that puts enormous pressure on getting food into the cities.
And climate change is hitting traditional farms hard too, right?
Definitely. Conventional farming is facing more heat stress, more droughts, the soil is getting degraded. By 2050, projections show we might have less than 0.20 hectares of good farming land per person. That's not a lot.
Wow.
So traditional farming is becoming riskier, less reliable.
And vertical farming kind of sidesteps a lot of that by design, especially the land issue in cities.
Precisely. That's a huge advantage. Space utilization. Vertical farms can pop up in places you wouldn't expect: old factories, empty warehouses, office buildings, shipping containers, even rooftops.
Turning unused urban space into food production.
Exactly, right where people live. Which leads to another big benefit: reduced food miles.
Yeah, that makes sense. Less trucking, less fuel.
Significantly less. You cut transportation costs, you cut carbon emissions, and consumers get much fresher produce because it hasn't traveled for days. It can also help stabilize prices, less exposure to fuel cost spikes.
And you mentioned it's not just food.
Right, there's potential beyond food crops. These controlled environments could be ideal for growing specific plants used in cosmetics, or even for producing pharmaceutical compounds.
And what about jobs? Does this create work in the city?
It absolutely can. It creates what people are calling green-collar jobs. Roles focused on running these high-tech farms, managing the system's sustainability. It contributes to urban revitalization, making cities potentially more self-sufficient and resilient.
Okay, so it addresses urban challenges, uses space smartly, cuts transport. Let's talk efficiency and sustainability. You called it a green efficiency machine. What does that actually look like in terms of resource use?
The numbers are pretty staggering, actually. Let's start with water. Vertical farms typically use less than 1% of the water needed for conventional agriculture
Less than 1%. How?
because they use closed-loop systems. Water is captured, recirculated, reused. Some systems achieve up to 98% less water consumption than a traditional farm. Overall, you're looking at maybe 10% of the water use of an open field, often even less.
That's incredible. And land use must be similar.
Even more dramatic, arguably. Because you're stacking upwards, you need less than 1% of the land area compared to conventional farming for the same output potential. You maximize the yield per square meter.
And because it's indoors.
Yeah.
Fewer pests, fewer chemicals.
Exactly. The controlled environment keeps most pests and diseases out. So the need for pesticides is virtually eliminated. And fertilizer use is drastically reduced and precisely controlled, delivered right to the roots. No runoff into rivers and streams.
So much more output from less land, less water, fewer chemicals. Does it grow faster too?
Yes, generally. Because conditions are always optimal. Perfect light, perfect temperature, perfect nutrients. Plants can grow significantly faster and produce higher yields. We're talking yields potentially over 500 times greater than the same size plot of traditional farmland.
500 times.
Potentially, yes. For example, lettuce that might take 60 days in a field could be ready in 40 days or even less in a vertical farm.
And you can do this all year round, no seasons.
Correct. Year-round harvests, consistent, predictable growth cycles regardless of blizzards or heat waves outside. This consistency is huge for supply chains.
So the overall environmental footprint looks much smaller.
Much smaller in many ways. Less water pollution from runoff, no negative impact on local biodiversity like plowing fields does, and much lower transport emissions. Plus, it fits really well with the idea of a circular economy.
How so?
Well, you can potentially recycle nutrients from other urban waste streams like phosphate or nitrogen and feed them back into the farming system. It helps the city become more metabolically efficient, reusing its own resources.
Okay, that level of efficiency is impressive. But how? What's the tech making all this possible? It sounds like a high-tech garden.
It really is. A lot of technology comes together. LED lighting is fundamental. Since there's little or no sunlight, these specialized LEDs provide the exact light spectrum plants need for photosynthesis. You can tailor the light for specific crops, boosting growth and efficiency, and they use way less energy than older grow lights.
And you need to monitor everything constantly, I mean.
Constantly. That's where sensors are key. Sophisticated sensors monitor everything in real time. Humidity, temperature, CO2, light levels, the nutrient mix in the water, pH levels. These are often IoT-enabled Internet of Things, so they feed data constantly, allowing for remote adjustments. You can basically create custom microclimates for different plants.
And then something has to make those adjustments based on the sensor data.
Right, those are the actuators. Think of them as the hands and arms of the system. They take the electronic signals from the control system and make physical changes, opening vents for airflow, moving lights, adjusting pumps for irrigation, precision control.
It sounds like a lot to manage, even with sensors and actuators. Is it heavily automated?
Automation is crucial. Labor can be a big cost in farming. Automation here handles tasks like seeding, moving trays, managing the irrigation and lighting, nutrient dosing, even monitoring the plants for health. Fully automated systems can work much, much faster than humans, maybe 10 to 30 times faster for certain tasks.
And what about robots? And I think you mentioned drones earlier.
Yes, robotics are becoming more common for the complex or physically demanding stuff. Precise harvesting of delicate greens, moving heavy stacks of trays, maintaining equipment. It reduces errors and labor costs, which can be, 25–30% of the operating budget. Some farms use AI with cameras to guide robots.
Like iFarm using neural networks.
Exactly, things like that. Analyzing plant mass, health. And drones, they're more about monitoring from above.
Flying around inside.
Sometimes, yes. They provide aerial views, gather data on plant health, leaf size, color, height, spotting problems early. Some systems even use drone data to optimize the lighting grid, focusing light where it's needed first, saving energy.
So AI pulls all this data together.
Pretty much. Artificial intelligence, AI, is like the brain, analyzing all the sensor and drone data, predicting growth cycles, spotting potential disease outbreaks, and constantly fine-tuning the environment for maximum yield. And powering all this tech requires smart energy solutions too, like smart grids to manage potentially fluctuating renewable energy sources, and maybe even energy harvesting tech for low-power sensors.
It's an incredible technological ecosystem. But the big question, is it actually profitable? Does the economic reality match the technological promise? It sounds expensive to build.
That is definitely the major challenge right now. The high upfront cost. Capital expenditure is significant.
Why so high?
Two main reasons. First, urban real estate. Building in a city center like Melbourne is vastly more expensive per square meter than buying rural land. Second, the infrastructure itself, the building, the climate control systems, the thousands of LEDs, the automation tech, it all adds up. A large facility might need millions in electricity costs per year just for lighting. Setting up a single large-scale farm can cost hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oof. Okay, so that's a huge barrier. What's the argument for it making economic sense in the long run?
Well, several things help balance it out over time. You save massively on transportation costs, as we discussed.
Right, producing locally.
You also save significantly on inputs like pesticides and fertilizers, which are ongoing costs in traditional farming. Those costs are nearly zero here.
And the higher yields must play a big role too.
A huge role. Getting much more produce much faster from the same space helps recoup that initial investment quicker. Plus, you can often get premium prices for hyper-local, fresh, high-quality produce, especially in cities. You can even potentially adjust the taste profile slightly through the nutrient mix, increasing marketability.
Does climate change make vertical farming look better economically over time?
It definitely strengthens the case, as climate change makes traditional farming riskier and potentially more expensive, needing more irrigation, dealing with crop failures. The reliability and controlled output of vertical farming become more valuable. Its long-term affordability arguably increases as conventional farming faces more pressure.
Who's footing the bill for these initial costs? Is it all private money or do governments help?
That's a really important point. Because the costs are high, it often makes most sense initially in places with strong purchasing power. And historically, government subsidies have heavily favored traditional agriculture. Billions from, say, the USDA go to conventional farmers, which can keep supermarket prices for traditional produce artificially low. That makes it harder for vertical farms to compete purely on price, at least initially.
Is that changing, though? Is there more official support now?
There are signs of change. The USDA, for instance, has identified vertical farming as a priority area for study and potential support. They do offer grants for conservation practices, which could potentially apply. So recognition is growing, and future funding might follow.
And what about new models, like farming as a service? Could that lower the barrier to entry?
Yes, farming as a service, or FACES, is a really interesting development. The idea is companies provide the tech, the systems, maybe even market access as a service. So a farmer wouldn't need hundreds of millions up front. They could essentially rent or lease the capability.
Like a subscription model for farming tech?
Kind of, yeah. It could make it much more accessible, especially for smaller operators or entrepreneurs in cities. But it's important to remember right now, profitability often depends on the crop.
Ah, okay. Not everything works.
Not yet, economically speaking. It's becoming more cost-effective, but currently it really makes the most sense for things like salad greens, microherbs, maybe berries, crops that are relatively small, have quick turnaround times, and command a good price. Those are where the numbers often stack up best today.
That makes sense. Okay, this high-tech, large-scale stuff is amazing, truly. But, for listeners who are maybe just curious or thinking about growing something, is there a simpler way, something closer to home?
Oh, absolutely. You don't need a multi-million-dollar facility to benefit from some of these ideas. A great starting point, really accessible, is growing microgreens.
Microgreens, the tiny little leafy thing.
Exactly. They're basically young seedlings of vegetables and herbs. Super easy to grow, very inexpensive to get started, and incredibly low maintenance. You can grow them in shallow trays, indoors on a windowsill, outdoors on a patio. They don't need much space at all.
And they grow fast, right?
Very fast. You can often harvest them in just a week or two. Perfect for adding fresh flavor and nutrients to salads or sandwiches right from your kitchen counter. It's a fantastic way to dip your toes into indoor growing.
That sounds very doable.
Yeah.
Anything else for someone with maybe a bit more space, like a backyard?
Yeah, there's a really neat concept called spun-in farming. It stands for small plot intensive.
Yeah.
It's all about using small plots, like literally a backyard or small urban lot, really efficiently to grow high-value vegetables.
Yeah.
It often incorporates things like using local compost, really focusing on soil health in that small space, and selling directly, maybe at a little stand right there.
So hyper-local, low-tech intensive gardening.
Exactly. It cuts out transport completely and connects growers directly with their neighbors. It shares that spirit of maximizing production in small, often urban spaces, just without the high-tech vertical build-out.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've covered how vertical farming works, from hydroponics to controlled environments.
Looked at the incredible efficiencies, saving water, saving land, reducing chemicals,
Explored the amazing tech, the LEDs, sensors, AI.
and tackled the tough economic questions, the cost versus the long-term benefits and crop choices.
It's clear it's a powerful approach, maximizing yield, minimizing impact, and bringing fresh food right into our cities.
It really does feel like a glimpse into the future of food production, adapting to our changing world.
And it leaves you with a thought, doesn't it? If we embrace innovations like this in our cities, getting more food from these dense, efficient farms, what could that mean for traditional farmland?
Yeah, could it free up vast areas of land, allow some of that land to return to nature, maybe? Restore ecosystems?
Imagine that, using urban innovation, not just to feed cities, but potentially to help regreen parts of the planet. A really interesting thought.
It definitely challenges us to think differently about where our food comes from and how we produce it.
Indeed. Something for all of us to reflect on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope this exploration has been valuable. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Hitting that like button and smash that subscribe.